Alright, another grim debunk. This is a series where we take a look at some of the online claims about Warhammer 40k and just see if it's actually in the lore or if it's heresy. Is it a misconception or is it a truth that we can find in the books? We're going to continue our series on the Emperor of Mankind, and today the claim is that the Emperor scattered the baby Primarchs throughout the galaxy himself. Now, in examining this claim, we're going to look at things like the fact that the worlds that the Primarchs landed on matched their personalities and design almost perfectly. Also take a look at the second most powerful perpetual next to the Emperor, Erda, and her role in the scattering. The idea that Chaos and the Emperor made a deal to create the Primarchs and how that might affect the scattering, as well as the possibility that the Primarchs themselves were swapped between different worlds. Okay, so a little bit of background on this. In his super science lab on Terra, the Emperor created 20 superhumans called Primarchs that he would raise to conquer the galaxy. Now, these Primarchs were kidnapped as babies by some force and flung across the galaxy, coming to land on 20 different worlds where they grew up, and the Emperor, to complete his grand plans, had to search the galaxy until he found each one of them Pokemon style during something called the Great Crusade, which is also where he went around conquering all the worlds throughout the galaxy, as you do. Now, the commonly accepted version is that the Chaos Gods broke into his lab and scattered the babies. So, because they were afraid of the Emperor's plans coming to fruition. So how then does it make sense for the Emperor to be the one who scattered the babies? Why would he start a plan and then ruin it? What is the evidence behind the claim? One, almost all the baby Primarchs landed on human inhabitable worlds. Right, so either there were humans already existing there that the Primarchs were adopted by, or it was a world that a human could grow up on and survive. Like, none of them landed on a gas giant or anything like that, or in the heart of a star. Second, all the worlds they landed on were crazily conveniently tailored towards them. The Psycho Primarch lands on a world full of Psychers. The Wolf Primarch lands on a world full of wolves. If that stuff is happening purely by coincidence, it's a crazy coincidence. And then there's the timing. The Emperor would find each son on their world either only after they'd conquered that world themselves. He'd rock up and be like, "Nicely conquered world, thank you." Or he would turn up at a time of their desperate need to help conquer the world, like say with Korax, Angron and Mortarion. The Emperor turned up just in time to lend a hand. Or kind of not with Angron, but that's another story. So essentially we have sus worlds, sus timing. So this leads us to the question of why. He made the babies. Why get rid of the babies? So one possible motivation is the whole ancient Sparta trope. The idea that he took his son, put him in the forest, or the galactic forest, and said, "If you are worthy, you will not die." Another gentler version of that is the idea that he wanted the baby Primarchs to be humanized by humanity itself in a way that the Emperor wouldn't be able to do if he brought them up. You know, he's not the most cuddly fella in the world. We also need to consider that the Primarchs themselves are tools of conquest. And what better way to stress test your tools of conquest than to throw them out into the world and ask them to conquer? Another potential reason why is that he always planned the heresy. And by sending them to worlds that might corrupt them, he would make his own Primarchs more willing to rebel against him in the future. Now this one leans into the whole conspiracy theory that the Emperor actually planned the Horus Heresy himself, and we can go into that another time. But essentially all you need to know is that this basically makes the scattering part of his the madness of his method. There's the idea that the Emperor made a deal with Chaos to create the Primarchs in the first place, and as a result of this bargain, he had to let them take the Primarchs. You know, it's a little bit like a fairy tale. Give me a firstborn son, or give me a first 20. Finally, there's the idea that the scattering was just totally out of his hands, that Chaos, whoever, took the Primarchs away from him, but all the Emperor could do was guide the Primarchs to the correct planets, or try and guide the Primarchs to the planets that he thought were best. Okay, so now that we understand the claim, my favourite part is the claim that the Emperor of Mankind scattered the baby Primarchs himself. Is it lore, or is it heresy? It's lore. For once, it's lore. It's in the books. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, though. Just because something is in the books, just because something is lore, doesn't necessarily mean it's a fact, right?
So the first bit of lore we have on this is the Dark Angels Index Astartes. It's the first bit of text that I could find with a blatant reference to the idea that the Emperor scattered the Primarchs himself. A disaster befalls the Primarch project. The unborn Primarchs are consequently lost and scattered amongst the stars. Then it runs through a few different in-universe theories on what could have happened. One was the Chaos Gods couldn't destroy the baby Primarchs, scattered them across the galaxy. The other one was the baby Primarchs themselves decided to get a bit curious and go for a baby's day out across the galaxy, and they left the Emperor behind them. And then last but not least, it talks about how the others maintain it was the Emperor himself who cast the Primarchs adrift on the tides of the galaxy so that they could learn and live truly away from him. And that's the one that we're interested in. It goes on to say that it's likely that only the Emperor himself knows the truth. Another Index Astartes clue towards this claim is the Ultramarines one. Now, in this one, the Imperial scholars talk about there being a huge clue as to who or why the Primarchs were scattered as babies. And it says that the clue is contained in one of Connor's visions. Now, Connor is the adopted father of Robuti Guilliman. Robuti. In Connor's vision, he sees chaos, he sees demons, he sees all sorts of awful stuff, and then he sees a warrior, a knight, awash in power, driving back the darkness. And then the warrior turns to Connor and points to a little blonde baby and says, "Save my little blonde baby." This could be Connor just having a wacky dream. It could be Connor's latent psychic powers coming to the fore. But the implication from the article, and what the Imperial scholars certainly seem to believe, is that the Emperor is directly talking to Connor and saying, "Hey, my baby is on the way," which implies that either the Emperor knows that Robuti is going to end up on Macragge, or that he put him there. One more thing from the Index Astartes that might corroborate the Ultramarines and the Dark Angels articles is the Wordbearers one. In that, Lorgar, who lands on his own planet of Colchis, I'm not too sure, he also receives visions of the Emperor coming to find him and reunite with him on this planet. If that's supposed to work together with the visions for Connor, then that would imply that the Emperor is telling Lorgar, "Hey, I know where you are. I'm coming to pick you up. Wait there. Also, conquer the planet." Next, we have the Horus Heresy novel Unremembered Empire by Dan Abnett. Now, in this one, Guilliman Robuti is thinking back to when his father, the Emperor, told him about how the powers of chaos snatched the baby Primarchs away from him. And Robuti thinks about this, and he thinks to himself that it's complete nonsense. His father was giving him a cover story, as far as Robuti is concerned. Because for him, he thinks that the Emperor is far more competent than that, than to allow chaos to take the kids away. He thinks that the Emperor allowed the scattering to happen, or arranged for it. Having 20 genetically engineered heirs wasn't enough. They had to be tested, they had to be tempered. And scattering them across the universe in space and time is the only way to see which one would actually succeed. This is perfectly in line with the way that Robuti thinks. I mean, he's essentially a space Spartan, a 30k space Spartan, which is very much in line with the whole pop culture idea of Spartans dumping babies in the woods and being like, "Show me what you got, kid." Along similar lines is Pharos by Guy Haley, another Horus Heresy novel. In this one, Kurz and Sanguinius, two other Primarchs, are having a disagreement or having a discussion over how they thought they were scattered. And Kurz points out that it's just a little bit convenient that we all landed on planets that were perfectly suited to who we are. And Sanguinius is like, I kind of don't want to say it, but yeah, it's hella convenient. In a short story by Jim Swallow called Lantern's Light, Mortarion is thinking back to a similar conversation he had with the Emperor about the scattering and how his dad pretty much evaded any clear answer on what the hell went down. And Mortarion, when he tries to come up with possibilities of what actually happened, he doesn't like any of the ones that come to his mind, which implies that he thinks that the Emperor might have dumped the Primarchs into the galaxy himself. The big one that shows us something happening in real time is False Gods by Graham McNeill, a very early Horus Heresy book. In this one, Horus, the favourite amongst the Primarchs, supposedly travels back in time to the lab with the baby Primarchs in it before they were scattered. And he actually sees a warp portal open up within the lab. The Emperor appears. The baby Primarchs are about to be sucked through the warp portal. The Emperor appears and stops them mid-flight, stops time essentially, thinks about it, weighs up all the possibilities, and then just goes, yeah, and lets the baby Primarchs be sucked through the warp. Horus is watching the whole thing go down, and he's yelling out, no, don't do it, Daddy. The Emperor doesn't care, walks away. It might be that Horus went back in time. It might be a vision shown to him by the Chaos Gods, which is true. It might also be a doctored vision, right? The Chaos Gods are just showing Horus what they want him to see. It might even be an allegorical retelling of the events rather than an actual literal one. The other way, this supports the claim that the Emperor, at the very least, allowed or agreed to the Primarchs being scattered across the galaxy. Next up, we have Wolfsbane, another Siege of Terra novel by Guy Haley. So in this one, Leman Russ, the 6th Primarch, is talking to a demon, and the demon has taken on the image of what Leman might have looked like if he was brought up on Terra rather than scattered to Fenris. And this demon Russ says to the real Leman Russ, he says to the true Leman Russ, hey, have you ever considered what a huge coincidence it is that you're the Wolf Primarch, you land on a wolf world and have a wolf legion? Do you really think that you were sent there by chaos or by random chance? Have you just considered that this was all done on purpose? Very much implying, hey, maybe you need to check with Dad. But Leman is all like, I trust Dad. It's not that deep. And again, this is coming from Chaos, not exactly the most reputable source. Then in Saturnine, I have really got to research how to pronounce these things before I start doing this, by Dan Abnett, we learn that Erda, who is one of the most powerful perpetuals, probably second only to the Emperor in power, and also one of the scientists on his Primarch project, and a co-contributor of genetic material to create the Primarchs, essentially making her the genetic mother of all 21 Primarchs, essentially lost faith in the Emperor's plan and flung the baby Primarchs across the galaxy herself under her own power. Now, as far as the story itself is concerned, this is a revelation. Before the Emperor was blamed, before Chaos was blamed, now it's Erda doing this all on her own because she wants to muck up the plan. Now, when asked about it, she says that the Emperor was mad, but he never came after her, never took any revenge, and just kind of let it go. That could also be just the way the Emperor rolls, right? He's not a particularly vindictive dude. It could imply that she was more or less unknowingly following what he wanted her to do. Did the Emperor, knowing who Erda was and what her morals were and the way she thought, did he bring her onto the Primarch project himself, knowing that she would eventually, because of her morals, because of her views on the world, fall out of love with the idea of the Primarch project and then try and sabotage it? Was she just doing what he wanted her to do all along, thinking that it was her choice? The Emperor, like the Chaos Gods, tend to use other people, like agents, to carry out their actions or carry out their will rather than get their hands dirty, so it's a possibility. And we also have the book Valdor, Birth of the Imperium by Chris Wright. I'll figure it out. Set during the time of the Primarch project. Well, parts of it are set during the time of the Primarch project, before the Great Crusade, before the Primarchs are found. Now, in this book, it's very clear, or it seems to be the huge implication, that the scattering is caused by chaos. Erda isn't mentioned in the Primarch project here, but it seems very much to imply that chaos is the one that stole the babies away from the lab. Now, the wrinkle here is that in the lab, when the Emperor is creating the Space Marine legions that are connected to the Primarchs, each of them has, in the laboratory, before even knowing what these legions would be called, what they would be like, he has sigils and symbols like a wolf's head, a drop of blood with angel wings, all these things that essentially correlate to the legions as they one day would be. Now, this could be the Emperor with his future vision, precognition, being able to see the future and know what the legions would be like. This could say that the Emperor just designed the legions to be of a certain character, and no matter what, they were going to end up being like that. It's kind of sus that they ended up on worlds that would completely support how they were designed. And then last book reference is Scars, also by the same author, Horus Heresy novel. In that, Jagate Khan, the 5th Primarch, is having a discussion with Magnus the Red, another Primarch who has ostensibly gone over to the traitor side, and Jagatai is still one of the loyalists. In that, Magnus's shard, Magnus says to the Khan, to Jagatai, that he could tell him that Jagatai and another Primarch, Fulgrim, who was one of the traitor Primarchs, as babies on the way to their worlds were swapped. So Jagatai ended up on Chogoris, Fulgrim ended up on Chemos. But they were originally meant to go to each other's planets. Jagatai to Chemos, Fulgrim to Chogoris. And then some arcane force swapped the two of them. Working off of this, it very much seems, in that case, that either the Emperor intended them for different planets and then Chaos swapped them over, or Chaos intended them for different planets and then the Emperor swapped them over. So there you have it. It's definitely lore. It's 100% in the lore. But what we need to be careful with is just because something is actually in the lore, it doesn't necessarily mean it's true, right? It's just one thing that's been presented to us to theorize on, to wonder about, to discuss, rather than giving us a concrete answer. So, was the scattering all the Emperor's plan? Was it actually his co-plan with Chaos? Was it a compromise when he realized that he couldn't stop Chaos? That he could not stop the babies from being taken from him, but he could at least guide the process? Or was he actually completely tricked or flummoxed or snookered by Chaos and just trying to play catch-up? Did Chaos and the Emperor essentially play galactic pool, knocking little baby Primarchs, across the billiards table, trying to land them in the right pockets? Leave it up to you guys to decide. I'll just finish that off by saying the main theory, and the one that comes up the most, and it comes up a lot more than the Emperor stuff does, is that Chaos is the one that took the baby Primarchs away. Whether Chaos acted on its own, or acted with the Emperor, or acted with Erda, we don't know. It's up in the air. If you have any questions, please chuck them down in the comments below, or even if you just have some nice kind words. Subscribe. Another one coming up in the Emperor soon. Hope you enjoyed this one, and I'll see you all next winter.